Hey peeps, this is Matt with Mad Ideas, and I'm going to be responding to some Facebook nonsense. And it is, tell me what southern states' right the South was fighting for when they seceded. If you say anything but slavery, you're wrong! Yeah, how do you let something like that go? Yeah, I couldn't let that go. Holy crap. I mean, on so many levels this is wrong, but I'm going to take you through the step by step on this one, kids. So the first thing here, the first thing that I'm really just appalled by, the mentality of, if you don't agree with me, you're wrong. And I'm like, you can't let that go. I mean, it's just too wrong to let go. It is the argument style of a 5-year-old, which astounded me because normally, I mean, the person who wrote this is intelligent, well read, well learned, and like you can discuss astrophysics and history and all sorts of different things, usually pretty well. And he produces the argument style of a 5th grader. I'm like, where did you learn this? And in the course of the argument, he cited Ken Burns. I'm like, well, I didn't want to bring this up, but Ken Burns, as a historian, is not a historian. Take a look at his Twitter page. I'm familiar with Ken, and you look at his Twitter page, he's not a historian. He states it. Documentary filmmaker producing films. He writes it in his book. Now, these are the kind of guys who make those statements. Now, that gives you something to think about real quick here. See, this is the Ken Burns book. Have read it. Ken Burns consults historians, though he actually did, I found out, state that slavery is the cause of the Civil War, which, again, though he is a documentary filmmaker, in his book, this book right here, he states, I'm a filmmaker, and then it is written mostly by historians. It's a collection of articles about history. So, the Young Turks are the people who state aggressive and stupid arguments. They're the ones who are like, we know what's best for you. You listen to us. You're not smart enough to thank you. Okay, I don't even know what kind of accent I was going for there, so if I managed to insult 4 different groups of people, I apologize. But the point being, you have this irrational argument style, and it's made popular by YouTube channels like that. It's made popular by people like Rush Limbaugh, where basically the idea is you are not smart enough to make decisions. We are the smart people. And my faith lies within you, the American people. And I believe you can make good decisions. So I'm going to give you some guide points. If the argument sounds like it came from a 5-year-old, or maybe ends with the phrase, I'll tell my mommy on you, you're probably listening to a poorly conceived, poorly thought out argument. If the argument has to include some way of making you feel like your opinion is inferior if you disagree with it, it is probably a bad argument. If it only can make fun of the other side without producing evidence as its initial argument, it's probably a bad argument. There are many different things, and I will actually probably make a video on how to produce an actual argument versus how to produce a bad one. So aside from the fact it's a bad argument, I have a second issue with this statement, in that it's not stating everything it's intending. I had to think about it a little bit because, not everything comes to me directly, And in reality, this is probably a response to the ISIS-like need to tear down monuments. What? Okay, it's not ISIS tearing down these monuments, it's enraged liberals, and they really want Confederate war monuments torn down because they are racist. And the people in the South, well, not all the people, I mean, I'm not going to blanket statement the South, or even all the liberals as that go, there's probably some who don't care. But the people of the South have stated repeatedly, we didn't put these up to be racist. We put it up to honor our grandfather or great-grandfather who was a great commander. Now, admittedly, they were fighting for the wrong side, but one thing I have learned about dealing with Southerners through various activities on the phone, they're direct people. They're not going to lie to you. If you hear in the background, they'll like, what was it? You okay? Yeah, my kid was mouthing off. I mean, they don't hide things like Northerners do. As a matter of fact, I had a friend in college, African American, large gentleman, big guy, and he said he preferred living in the South where he was born, because in the North, if someone didn't like him because he was black, they wouldn't tell him. It would just come out later after they'd done something sneaky or offhanded to him. In the South, he said that people would outright racially slur him, and he knew which person didn't like him. He didn't have to play games. So, I bring up the fact he's a big guy because he was about NFL lineman size. He was like 6'5", 350 pounds, like 400 pounds even. I don't know how big he was, but huge dude. And if you could walk up to that guy and say, I don't like you because of the color of your skin, in the most offensive way you can think of, I mean, honestly, that right there states they are unwilling to lie about something like that. They just don't do it. They're not like the people in the North who, you know, smile and then put the knife in your back, you know what I mean? So, as a further idea, we have another little bit of an issue here with this statement, in that it's, well, let's get back to the idea of the statue removal thing. I said ISIS-like, the Islamic terror group, who liked breaking statues that disagreed with their ideology. I'm not a very big one for that. In large part, it's because, as an art person, I'm an artist. You can probably see my drafting table in the background. I liked art history. I embraced art history, loved it. I don't like seeing statues destroyed because somebody's undies get in a bunch. So, needless to say, I'm not too hot on the destruction of artwork, even if it's celebrating a person who, yeah, they may have been very accomplished, but they did some horrid things. Now, if someone makes a statue of Donald Trump or Bill Clinton, I have a suspicion there are going to be people on both sides of the parties who want to tear it down, but most of us, who cares? Which, by the way, if you really do want the statues gone, you live in the area, you find it as an insult to your family or an embarrassment to your family, depending on which side of the slavery turmoil you stood, then get elected to your local government and tear the thing down. It's not really my business, but I do like the reminder of the people can revolt against the government if the government gets out of hand, as it has been. I'd prefer not to revolt, though, because obviously there's a lot of death involved in that sort of thing. But let's take it to the next issue, because it's kind of interrelated to this, and it's the simplicity at which they approach this. Now, Marcus Aurelius is probably best known to you by way of Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs as saying, simplicity, look for the simplicity. And if you can cut something down to what need it fulfills. By just one need, you're going to get this guy. But in truth, secession isn't like that. Secession is more like a relationship. And the divorce end of the relationship, but nonetheless like a relationship. And I want you to think about someone you love. It's pretty simple. A parent, a aunt or uncle, a child, your daughter or son, your boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever you got, whatever person it is you truly, deeply care for. And I want you to explain to me why you love them in one word that actually explains why you love them. Because if I put everything about my wife, first off, that would be a fallacy. I love my wife, and one of the things that you have to realize with love is you have to be looking at the person for who they truly are, see their shortcomings, and still love them anyway. So, needless to say, there are a lot of things I love about my wife. I'm not going to go into all the details. There's a lot of things I love about my sons. I'm not going into all the details. Why? Because there are many of them. On the flip side of the coin, I'm going to go back to an ex-girlfriend from decades ago, possibly, and introduce you to someone who we thought was one of her friends said to me. After the relationship was over, this woman approached me with her daughter, so I was really flummoxed because I didn't really want to insult the woman in front of her daughter, because I think it wouldn't be for the daughter's benefit. But she asked straight out. It was the boobs, wasn't it? And I was really put off by this on so many levels, because first off, she had pretended to be in this woman's corner. And that's the kind of commentary she makes. Secondly, how dare you say I'm so flippin' shallow, lady? God dang, but I couldn't say it. So I'm like, because what do you do when someone says something that coarse and just rude, And if you think Southern secession is like that, honestly, you really should look at how you are thinking about things. Show some depth, show some character, look at the people on both sides. There's a historian named Herodotus who did just that. The Peloponnesian War, huge event in ancient history. He reported it as a history in a way that no one else did, making him the father of histories. He recorded both sides. He didn't record just the Greek city-state he's from, the one he's living in, or the Greek city-states in general. He recorded the Persian side. He recorded what I believe were the Turks. Not young Turks, oddly enough. But he recorded their thoughts on it. He recorded their numbers. So like the Greeks said, we faced an army of 10,000 and there were only 300 of us. He actually recorded that the leader of that army said, no, there were more like 100,000 of us and there were only 300 of them. We were routed by superior strategy and their will to fight. So they recorded both sides of the history, which right now, that argument obviously blatantly only shows one, which means if you're one of the states' right people and says, it's only states' right, I have the same issue with you. But here, for those of you who believe or don't understand either side of the argument, slavery, and by the way, my fourth issue, and this is where I'm going with this statement is wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong! It's not just one issue. You can have more than one thing going on at the same time. It's amazing. Like, for instance, right now, while I'm doing this, There's someone like a house over having eggs and bacon. You know, my doing this is not preventing them from having their eggs and bacon. So, yeah, there's more than one reason. Like, way more than one. But we're going to look at states' rights here because I'm addressing his argument, per se. And there are a lot of different documents you can go to, and a lot of them will say slavery. And like I'm saying, slavery in of itself is not the only issue. It is a pivotal issue, though. So we're not going to ignore slavery. And by the way, just so you know, just so you're aware, slavery was a bad thing. Don't do it yourself, kids. And, you know, one of the things about the people at that time everyone doesn't understand is how tempting is the idea of slavery? Well, if you could get some machine to do your carpets for you, like vacuum them or vacuum your floors, you'd get it, wouldn't you? I mean, I know because they have these little round things that cats sit on and they vacuum as they go. And if you dehumanize another person enough to where it seems like a good possibility, people will do that. They will have another person do it for them and not feel bad about it at all, at least as far as most of human history is concerned. It's only now, where we've been away from slavery for a long time, do we look at it as an unthinkable evil. But human history is riddled with it. So that's how it can be more than one issue, because even the North didn't view the Civil War as just slavery at the time. You know, take it from the people of the time. You know, Ken Burns, a fascinating fellow, I'm sure. Okay, I'm not sure. He looks kind of like just a dude to me, but the Young Turks, aggressive, yeah, but they aren't the people of that time. So let's ignore what they have to say for the time being. Let's go to the documents. Obviously, the secession documents from each individual state, the ones that bothered to make anything in any depth, they're riddled with white supremacy. They are riddled with slavery is one of our basic tenets for breaking away from the Union. They also allude to the American Revolution. The American Revolution. Now, how did I find out about this? Who is the historical genius that I went to find out how this came to be? Well, oddly enough, it was Abraham Lincoln, of all people. He wrote a letter to Erastus Corning. President Lincoln wrote that the insurgents, the secessionists, had been preparing for this event for 30 years in advance of the North. Now here's the thing. We're looking at this here. We're going, honest, Abe, what are you thinking, pal? 30 years, that's like 1830, man. Nothing was going on. But of course, history is very different then than it is now, in the fact that people were kind of paying attention to it. People were still living vicariously through it. People, you gotta keep in mind, it had only been, the nation is only about 50 years old at this time. And what is going on that makes Lincoln think 30 years ago they were preparing for a revolution? Why? Were all the slave things that the North doing at the time? You know, all the underground railroads and things like that really getting on the South's nerves that bad 30 years ago? Why did they wait so long? Well, okay, let's take a look at that then. A lot of the trouble started with the cotton gin. There's a lot of people who suggest that if that invention had never been made, slavery might have died out because the most labor-intensive crop happened to be cotton. Meaning there is a large number of people who speculate that without cotton being king, the South wouldn't have continued utilizing slave labor. Also, it produced another factor. The North started skyrocketing into the industrial age. Now, the industrial age was good. No complaints. Steam power rocks, riverboats rock, paddle wheels, mass production, things like that had certainly great effects for our nation. And it also had great effects for Great Britain. Yeah, gotta remember, Britain actually started the Industrial Revolution a little bit before we did, and they didn't want to see us get a foothold in what they thought was their territory. They wanted the factories to themselves. They wanted the production to themselves, and they made an effort to sabotage us. They did kind of what Walmart does to everyone else. Yeah, they make it to where we're going to sell something at this cost to these customers for only a few pennies more. So in this market over here where there's actual competition, we can lowball. And we're going to make it to where the prices in the United States, for instance, as compared to India or Canada or Australia or Hong Kong or any of the number of places where Britain had its little fingers in with its Commonwealth, we are going to make it to where the United States won't be able to take off with its industry because they won't buy their own products. The idea was undercutting the United States businessmen. Now, the government, and I always thought this was a wise idea, determined to make sure that industry grew, put up protective tariffs. And this was about the 1820s, 1827, if I remember correctly. And the South, not being industrialized, a further separation, another cause for the Civil War, really didn't like these tariffs. They were saying things like taxation without representation. You may have recalled that phrase being used before in American history for the American Revolution. So did the Southerners. They pulled it from there specifically. And they pulled it because they were suggesting as a state they had the right, states' rights, that's the other one. As a state they had the right to say, no, we won't pay this tax. And they, oddly enough, referred to one of the original framers of the Constitution, meaning certainly he must know what he's talking about, Thomas Jefferson. They refer to Jefferson and say, you know what Mr. Jefferson said? Mr. Jefferson said a state can annul the federal government when it comes to a tax. Because right now, our people are facing hardships. And then to protect your businesses, your interests, you're going to tax our people more when they're already having a hard time making it along? No, we can't do this. And this crisis came to a head in about 1830, which is 30 years before the Civil War, meaning Abraham Lincoln, I'm sure, knows his history, being as where it was probably during his lifetime. And the South Carolinians were saying, we are going to secede from this union. And they were trying to get other states to leave. Two really important things happened. The first of which is a compromise was reached. The taxes were lowered and removed and all that. The other one was President Jackson said, you will be guilty of treason if you secede from the Union. Now, he wasn't talking just on the moralistic ideal. With Jackson, there is a physical, lethal threat involved when he says something like that. Jackson wasn't the kind of guy who'd just be like, well, yeah, it's treason, but we'll forgive you. We were family so long, you can leave and get your own house. No, he would have probably hunted them down and beat them to death with his own cane. And he was that kind of guy. So, there is, right there, your other right. Now, some of the other rights mentioned in these secessionist papers that the states produced when they said they were leaving, Texas probably had one of the most legitimate claims in stating that the federal government was not protecting its borders against Mexicans from the south, and not all Mexicans, by the way, just the bad ones, the banditos, and the natives from the west who were probably perturbed that the Texans kind of took it on their territory. And they said, federal government, where have you been? We gave up our sovereignty as a nation to join you. Now, why aren't you helping us out? As a matter of fact, there were a lot of people, including a slave owner by the name of Sam Houston, I'm sure you've heard the name Houston, who said, we shouldn't leave this country. They are still good for us. He was the governor at the time, and he got ousted for office for this. There were a lot of slaveholders who said, we shouldn't go to war over this. Right now, we've got a system going. The north half of the country is making its states and making its laws, and yeah, they are invading us and they are infringing upon our constitutional rights to own property, which I hate saying it, but yeah, break the law in that case. If someone's being held a slave, if it takes breaking the law to do it, break the law. And there's always these taxation rights, and really a lot of the whole thing was over which side is going to be able to govern themselves. They're looking at self-government as an issue. And it's not just one cause. And it's a deep and thinking and feeling thing, and it's really difficult. Until you study it, you have no idea how estranged the South was getting from the North. They were looking at Northerners as a separate race of white people, a different race. They were looking at conquering Mexico and Cuba and Jamaica to make more slave states. I mean, they really were producing some big plans here. Not good plans, but certainly plans. And in large part, it's a war that should have happened. There's a lot of things that could have gone much worse if it hadn't. What if Sam Houston's request of having the military show up in Texas and protect Texas from outside forces actually went through? Well, there would be a standing army in Texas. Houston may not have been deposed. People may have been much less likely to revolt with, say 4,000 troops stationed within the state, 10,000 troops, whatever they needed. I mean, all sorts of different things could have occurred. If Texas didn't go, would the rest of the states follow? There were several states that were saying, South Carolina, let's wait and see what Texas does before we go, because without control of both sides of the Mississippi River, this could get pretty ugly. And there were other states with other complaints, and, in large part, the history of it, you can debate it all you want. What happened is what happened. There were major issues. There was a major states' right issue. Taxation. And it held through for 30 years. It prepped a nation to try and separate itself. There was slavery. It's the pivotal issue. Would the other slave states have left if slavery was not on the line? If the North had not incurred into the South to press its will against them? Would the South have had such a bitter taste in their mouth about the North impressing their will upon them had those tariffs not existed? If poverty had not been made worse by a need that the North had to tax to protect its businesses, which it is a legitimate need of the North, should the South had to have suffered for it, though? Could they have rewritten the taxes? I mean, it's one of the very difficult issues of history. However, it's certainly not anywhere near as simple as my friend had made it out to be, and it certainly deserved discussion. He conceded a few points, and again got insulting, and then again got arrogant and nasty and all sorts of nonsense. Hopefully, though, through these difficult and trying politicized times, we can all get a little bit better with each other, maybe form a third party or do something constructive and actually make America a better place for everybody. And until then, I hope you take the time to like and subscribe to my channel, follow my videos, and I'll try and make hopefully some quicker ones, because this was a hard topic. Thanks for watching, friends.